I'm wanting to give a little lecture on Edgar Allan Poe's story entitled Ligeia. Some of the themes of this story include, well, obviously the death of a beautiful woman, which is typical in Edgar Allan Poe. A couple other stories that also deal with the death of a beautiful woman, Morella, Berenice, and the fall of the House of Usher. Other themes is resurrection from the dead, perhaps. You often see it in Poe in a number of stories, including the fall of the House of Usher. Also, substance abuse is one of the themes. Of course, Poe himself, as a writer, was an alcoholic, probably indulged in some other substances. And we often see some of the narrators or characters in his stories succumb to some type of substance abuse, whether it's opium, morphine, or some of the things that were being used back in that time in the 19th century. Publication history of Ligeia, first published September 18, 1938, edition of the American Museum. It was a magazine edited by two of Poe's friends, Dr. Nathan C. Brooks and Dr. Joseph E. Snodgrass. I think Poe made $10 for the story. This is payment, a very small figure now, but it was a pretty small figure then. Think about writing a story that became a world literature classic and you made $10 from it. But one reason that Poe, for most of his life, battled poverty, was overworked and underpaid, like many people are today. But story was extensively revised throughout its history of publication, reprinted in Poe's own Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, 1840, the one volume of Fantasy Pieces, 1842, and then 1845, the Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. Also the Broadway Journal, September 27, 1845. Critical reception of the story. Just a few notes from some eminent critics. Charles Eames of the New World commented, and this was at the time, force and boldness of the conception and the artistic skill with which writer's purpose is wrought out are equally admirable. Thomas Dunn English, writing in the October 1845 Aristide, said that Ligeia was, quote, the most extraordinary of its kind of his production, referring to Poe's works. Irish critic and playwright George Bernard Shaw said, the story of Lady Ligeia is not merely one of the wonders of literature, it is unparalleled and unapproached. As has been the case with many of Poe's stories, this one was adapted for the screen, the silver screen, and film, TV, theatrical. A number of his short stories have been. Roger Corman, the director, adapted the story into The Tomb of Ligeia in 1964 film. In fact, Corman adapted the works of Edgar Allan Poe into 8 separate films. So 8 film adaptations of Poe's works. Again, Ligeia's theme of the death and resurrection of a beloved woman. You kind of see that later in some of Alfred Hitchcock's productions, particularly Vertigo was one. More recent adaptations was a 2008 independent feature originally known by the title Edgar Allan Poe's Ligeia, later renamed The Tomb. film stars Wes Bentley, Michael Madsden, and Eric Roberts. I've heard of Roberts and Madsden. Roberts is the sister of the famous actress, brother of the famous actress Julia Roberts, and Michael Madsden has appeared in a number of the films of Quentin Tarantino. Just a few other points that I have here about Ligeia. Considered one of Poe's most successful attempts to merge the Gothic grotesque with the traditional love story. Ligeia gives the story its name. Every detail of the plot draws its purpose from the character because she is the object of the narrator's love. Ligeia perseveres in spite of the obstacles, death and light that Poe, as the author, places in her way. Of course, she dies, but her memory remains the primary fixation of the narrator's mind. He's completely preoccupied with Ligeia. Rowena, who's blonde-haired, replaces Ligeia as the narrator's wife, but the darkness of the marriage bedroom suffocates the blonde, and Ligeia returns in Rowena's body, viewing the blonde's body with her darker tones. Again, Poe, as he often does, he tends to emphasize contrasts, paradoxes, doubles. In this case, light and darkness to symbolize some philosophical complex traditions, or the conflict of a couple of philosophical traditions. If you'll note, Ligeia emerges from the Rhine, a river in southwest Germany. Being German, she symbolizes the Germanic romantic tradition, closely related to the Gothic, that embraced the sensual and the supernatural. But if you'll notice, Ligeia's mind is irrational and mystical, not exactly rational. Lady Rowena is the Ice Queen from the north, represents rationality, wholeness. And again, sort of Ligeia, the romantic tradition or philosophy, whereas Rowena, the rational, the enlightenment. So you have that conflict in philosophical views of the world. Of course, Ligeia's ultimate victory is her return from the dead, which is we see so common in Poe. The narrator of his stories and poems typically are obsessed with the death of a beloved woman, a beautiful woman, and their struggles with that. And of course, the idea of some kind of triumph over the grave, over the tomb, over the vault, the obsession with premature burial, and so forth. And if you want to look at the theme of substance abuse in this story, you might think of opium abuse. Ligeia's return from the dead confirms that the narrator has lost his power of rationality and lost touch with reality, in a sense. Of course, the narrator admits he has abused opium, so one questions the reliability of the narrator anyway. So that's another thing. And again, the question of whether or not Ligeia's return from the dead is actually physically real or some type of opium-induced delusion, but her apparent physical manifestation at the end of the story may mean that she's become more real for the narrator than just a memory, because he's haunted by that memory throughout, but ultimately at the end, perhaps becomes real, at least for him. Of course, in Ligeia, the narrator is obsessed with lost love, as we've seen in other stories. And there's contradictions there. The narrator passionately loves a woman without knowing her last name, for instance. Um, Poe also seems to offer the possibility that love brings Ligeia back, if only in the eyes of the narrator. Those mysterious eyes of Ligeia, which so much is spent in the description and describing those mysterious eyes, her Ligeia's vast knowledge. The narrator somehow seems to inherit her eyes, the power of Ligeia's eyes to take in unnatural knowledge, to see the dead. So the difference lies in the narrator's ability to convey his knowledge to us, allowing us to witness and judge the return of the Lady Ligeia. Of course, neither we nor the narrator ever saw what was behind Ligeia's eyes, and so the mystery of those eyes makes them so alluring in a way. Um, Again, Ligeia appears to be a love story, but it definitely relies heavily on that Gothic imagery. Um, and eyes are, of course, are crucial to this story. The physical eyes, Ligeia's hair takes on importance. Um, the obsession involves the fantasy of reducing various parts of Ligeia's body, whole being to certain body parts. Um, and I think the whole idea of, the notion of an immortal soul here, what we see surviving in Ligeia is not Ligeia's soul, but the materialized form of her body, conveyed symbolically in the last scene by her dark hair. Story dramatizing, in a sense, the unconscious longings of the narrator to see his lost love again. And these longings take the physical shape of Ligeia's body. So, in essence, love becomes the ability to revive a dead body. So, these are some points of the story. The haunted narrator, who may or may not be reliable because of his opium addiction. As I was saying, this concern with trying in some way to bring back not just the memory of a loved one who's been lost, in this case a beautiful woman, but somehow to bring back the physical presence, which we see at the end of the story. Very Gothic, haunting, definitely one of his better stories in that whole tradition of the Gothic short story.